right. Hello, this is Teja Gerken with Peghead Nation, and I'm in the studio here today with luthier Bruce Sexauer. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Teja.
Bruce has been building guitars for a long time, and we're very pleased that he came in today and brought in two of his latest guitars. So, what can you tell us about these guitars?
Well, these two guitars are fairly similar for guitars I build in that they are in the same size range. They're both concert-sized guitars, which is to say that they're 15 inches wide, but beyond that, they're fairly dissimilar. This is a 14 fret. This is an OM. It's a long scale 14 fret. Italian spruce top and Brazilian rosewood back and sides. Flitch matched, which is to say that the back, the sides, and the peghead veneers on both sides are all from the same piece of wood with an ebony fingerboard. It's a very conservative, traditional Martin-esque instrument, although my own template and headstock shape, but long scale. It's an OM. The guitar that Teja's holding is what I call a triple O, using again the Martin paradigm. It's a longer body. It's a 12 fret to the neck.
Right.
This is a cutaway, which guitar players in the quality category that we are will appreciate that because it
And I
gives
love
them
your
access.
cutaway shape. I think that's really that's one of your signature styles, really.
Yes, it's become as much a signature as my headstock shape. I agree that that's true. It's a lucky accident. I was bending I build a lot of Schoenberg guitars, and I was bending the Schoenberg cutaway, and the side broke. At this point, not on this guitar. This was many years ago, and so I salvaged that side because it was sides where you get another one. If I broke this side, I'd be in real trouble. Or this, it's the only European pear wood I've ever had. So I just took the remnant and finished the job and went, wow, do I ever like the way that looks?
Right.
It's it takes a little bit out of the electric guitar world.
Very nice looking. Yeah. So this guitar is European pearwood back and sides. What can you tell me about that?
Well, European pearwood is a traditional instrument wood. For instance, I believe that in the Italian era that's Stradivari and Guarneri were working, it was often used for cellos, probably occasionally for violins themselves. So it's a traditional wood. It was used before that era for lutes, certainly. And so when this set came available to me, first off, it was really beautiful to look at. And second, it's in the tradition, and I thought it would be very interesting to find out just how good a guitar it would make.
So when you say it's been used for cellos and violins and such, is it at all similar to maple?
No, I would say as a fruit wood, it's probably most similar to cherry. It's a very close wood. It has there's no pores to deal with. Definitely distinctly different than, say, walnut, which is a nut wood. It's very different. It's a very homogeneous, smooth wood, and it's wonderful as this guitar ages and the sun gets at it, which it really hasn't yet. This wood will deepen and become really beautiful, amber colored, as cherry does, but it's got a great deal more clarity to look at it than cherry does. Cherry's kind of more one tone.
Very, very nice, yeah. And it's spruce top on this, obviously. I know you do some construction things that are slightly different from many builders in that you don't use regular kerfing on the top. Is that right? You use the block.
Yes, I use
technique.
what are called peony, and some people call them tentelones.
Right,
They're
uh-huh.
both. Those
Like
are
the
both
Spanish
Spanish
classical
words. Peony means little thing. I just learned from one of my customers, and they are individually hand placed blocks. There are about 68 of them, gluing the top plate to the sides in this guitar.
Not many steel string builders do that.
No.
What do you think is the advantage of that for you?
Well, it allows me to control the strength of the joint between the top and the sides. On some instruments, I want to make that a little bit more tenuous so that the guitar is not quite so stiff, and on others, I want to like go for it because don't want there to be any question of integrity.
Right.
But the main thing that it gives me is that it allows me to put the top and the sides together in a relaxed way and then pin them where they are, as opposed to forcing them together, which is if you have your liners already glued to the sides and then force it to the top, that takes some pressure. I don't have any of that pressure here, and that means that my guitar starts off its life as a guitar relaxed and ready to go to work.
And that's a beautiful rosette on here. Is that one of your standard designs?
I have no real standard design unless you
right?
talk about the Martin-esque rosette, which, because I've done so many Schoenbergs, it's become a bit of a standard for me. But this is something that Trevor Moyle, who owns the Acoustic Music Company in Brighton, England, I did it for him first because he thought his customers would find my more common rosettes boring. And he's used to the modern thing, which involves burl wood and rings, and so I developed this with non-concentric rings and burl as a more interesting take on the standard modern luthier rosette.
Beautiful, very very nice. Beautiful guitars, both of them. The more, it's in some ways this is the more vintage guitar with a 12 fret neck and the old style triple O body, more or less, and yet it has the cutaway and some more modern features, whereas this may come across more traditional as well, but both in the vintage tradition, really taken to the more modern level of lutherie.
Yeah, when I started building,
which is 40 some years ago?
47 years ago. I started building in 1967, incredibly. My first acoustic guitars a couple of years later. I started with electric solid bodies. But when I did start building, I was influenced by the guitars I saw around me, but not by any instruction or any demands from customers. And so I built, I sometimes think of it as hippie built, but aesthetically I took a great number of risks. And then after 20 or 25 years, I met Eric Schoenberg and I started learning to build conservative Martin-esque instruments. And I went deeply in that direction. I tried to get them to be genuinely authentic looking to the best of my ability. And this would be an example then of my outgrowth of that, where the bridge is still very Martin-esque. The only real differences here in this bridge are that there's a slight point here compared to a Martin, where a Martin's rounded, and that my bridge ends are not actually parallel to each other. They're actually parallel to the edges of the fingerboard.
Oh, very cool. That's a really nice detail.
It's very subtle, but otherwise, and the angled bridge pins, which Martin I believe is doing now too. Otherwise, it's very Martin-esque. This bridge is an outgrowth of that, but it's got a number of interesting changes. It's a little bit longer. The same technology to make it. I use the same techniques to make it, but it is a little longer. The tips of the wings are narrower by a substantial amount. And the tapers, which you can't easily see here, but this surface and this surface are not parallel as they tend to be on other bridges. And also the wing isn't all one thickness out in here. It tapers up from nearly nothing. It tapers up slowly and then scallops out as a Martin would. And of course the ends are shaped to emulate this part of the guitar right here. So that aesthetically it fits on there nicely. There are little differences, but they have organically grown and changed over the years to where my modern work starts to in some ways resemble that hippie built work, but ever so much more sophisticated and based in the tradition now, which it was not then. And I think that's a very interesting full circle.
Very, very cool. So most of your work is custom orders. People come to you for custom guitars. You also build some guitars on spec, which I think these are examples of.
These
You're going
are,
to take these
yeah.
to the Woodstock Guitar Show.
Exactly.
And you have a lot of repeat customers, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them trade their guitars back into you. So sometimes you have used guitars for sale.
I do have a number of used guitars for sale. Quite a few years ago, I developed the idea that I would take my old work back in trade as long as the customer traded up 150% value. In other words, if they had, as my base price was a number of years ago, a $7,000 guitar, if they traded it in on new work, and my base price now being $10,500, well, that's about right there.
Right.
I would give them $7,000 for that guitar, and they would lay the rest of that on the table as cash, so I could keep going. For a long time, very few people took advantage of that offer. And then our recent recession depression came along, and starting in 2008, I have had an increasing number of people take advantage of that offer, to the point where I have over a dozen of my instruments on hand now. In the old days, when somebody took advantage of that offer, I had a used guitar of mine of high quality, because it has to be in perfect condition for me to give that much for it. And it was easy for me to sell it. But now I find myself with an overwhelming number of my older work, in most cases in perfect condition and playing really as well as anything I've ever made, because I arrived some time ago in the position that I find myself now,
Right.
consistently making first-class instruments. So.
Right.
And I don't really have an outlet for those instruments, so I find myself with a lot of guitars for sale at very reasonable prices and very representative of my current standards.
Okay. So if people want to visit Petaluma, California and check out some of your instruments, they should.
Boy, they could see a few there. Yes,
Okay.
they could.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Bruce. We'll give these guitars a bit of a playing test as well, so stay tuned for that. And we can't wait to see what else you come up with.
The future is arriving at a steady rate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.